Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Roth Novak. I'm the CEO and co founder of PartySlate. I am so excited for this session today with the one and only Bryan Rafanelli from Rafanelli Events. I have been a fan, Bryan, as you know, since the first Engage when I saw you speak in such an elegant, professional way with a business lens towards the world of events. So, thank you so much for being with us today. And before we get started and I do a formal introduction, would love to know where everyone is zooming in from. So if you can change your chat to all panelists and attendees, we can see, I see someone from Atlanta. We've had people from Bryan all over the world, the silver lining of virtual events, people from Europe, Africa, Asia, South America joining these webinars. So yes, I know we're ready for the world to open up again, but these virtual events have been a great silver line. Alaska, I don't think we've ever had anyone from Alaska. This is
I don't think
exciting.
so.
New York, snowy Dallas. You know what? In Chicago, we are used to snow. We have about 2 feet of snow. But when I saw Dallas and Houston, I'm like, the whole world must be shut down with that kind of snow because we're used to it in Chicago.
It's
So
raining up north, so
yeah, I feel for you guys in the South that have never seen snow like this before. But again, I'm Julie Roth Novak, CEO and co-founder of PartySlate. With me today, Bryan Rafanelli from Rafanelli Events. We are going to talk all about virtual galas and fundraisers, a cause that is very near and dear to me. I started PartySlate because I was doing a lot of corporate and nonprofit work on the side for my digital agency career. And I kept wanting to find inspiration for my type of event. And what I found were a lot of wedding blogs, and there's a lot of good ones out there, nothing wrong with them. And I found a lot of kind of corporate, business type events, but I didn't find anything for my type of event. And so when I started PartySlate 5 years ago, the goal was to be a place where you can get inspired for all types of larger scale events, whether it's fundraisers, galas, corporate, bar bat mitzvahs, 50th birthday parties, whatever it may be, you can get inspired and more importantly, find the best local event professionals and venues connected to those events. And so, Bryan, when we created your profile page, I think it was 4 years ago, I was so excited just to share some of your work on PartySlate. Like I felt like we kind of made it, So that was 4 years ago. Since then, we've been doing a bunch of things together, and we loved working with your team. And I'm so excited to have this event today on virtual gals. Pamela, our editor, is with us today. She will be taking
Hey,
questions
everything.
for everyone from Alaska to Dallas. You can ask your questions at any time. But Bryan, before we get started, I would love to hear a little bit about your founding story and how you got into the world of events. And Bryan's not very good at bragging, but again, everything from Chelsea Clinton's wedding to state dinners to the largest galas in the country. How did you get into this crazy world of events?
Well, Julie, first, thank you for inviting me to do this. I love, love, love talking about my craft. I think that conversation, or I know that conversation is critically important for folks in the business space to really understand how to run their businesses. I love PartySlate and congratulations with PartySlate. If you think selfishly, if you think about my business, I'm working with nonprofit, corporate, and private, and inside private is bar mitzvahs and weddings. So your platform is the perfect platform, right? I built a business out of interlocking circles of saying, if I do your daughter's wedding, I want to do your husband's holiday party or your wife's holiday party.
Yes.
I want to do their nonprofit event. I want to be the go-to company to do all of those things.
Yes.
And so PartySlate is the perfect, platform to showcase our work and to search and find inspiration. Because believe me, my little Bryans that sit on my shoulder all the time of like, I love weddings, I love galas, I
Yes.
love virtual events now.
Yes.
I actually just love a challenge, and we can talk about that later. But this is what I crave, and I crave that idea of trying to find inspiration. And you've created that for us, so thank
Thank
you.
you. And I did not pay him to say this, guys. So thank you, Bryan. I mean, this team has been working so hard over the last year during this pandemic when people are in pain to provide, free digital marketing education, thought leadership, improving the platform. And so that coming from you, that really means a lot to us. So thank you.
Well, it makes sense. You've created something that we all need and we're all using. So, I can pivot quickly to my story. My story really is this idea that I came out of nonprofit. I had a friend who was really sick with HIV/AIDS. I went and started volunteering for an organization on the special events committee. Back in the olden days, there was no special events majors or special events really lived inside of public relation companies.
Mhm.
So there weren't agencies that stood on their own. And so I didn't see it as a career. I just saw it as a, means to an end to help people. So today, and I know we're going to have lots of conversations about virtual, nothing makes me happier in that space that we can continue the good work of doing really great things for people and connecting people and raising money and making a big difference in their lives through this virtual world that we are, temporarily living in. And so, would I have ever imagined A, building an agency that does all of these things? No, but B, that when a pandemic hit, that we would be able to thrive. Um, and that's really, that's a pretty extraordinary thing for me to say. And I've been repeating it over and over again because we were able to do that. We were able to take the basic event and make it fit into this box.
It's amazing. And when you said you were doing it as a volunteer and then you made the transition to opening up your own company, who were those first clients that hired you and how did you jump from doing nonprofits to doing, state dinners
Well,
overnight, right?
it's like that magic.
Yeah.
I often when I'm in front of a wedding conference and I'm talking, I'm like, I want to, let everyone know that my first wedding, the budget for that wedding was over $300,000. So that's where I started, right? I want everyone to know that when I was in the nonprofit world, I was really working on some pretty extraordinary events day after day after day because the need was so big to raise as much money as possible. So that's what I was doing. I was really on a treadmill to be like dancing as fast as I could to gobble up all of these experiences. But I want to go to something it's really going to be my next book. It's all about relationships.
Mhm.
Relationships have saved my company in the virtual space. We can, in the pandemic, pivoting, it was because we built a brand that people trusted, that they said, oh, if Rafanelli's doing this, then it must be good, right? Now, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I tried to build a quality company. So that transferred very quickly into the virtual space. Like, we trust this guy. And
Yes.
so we trust him with our live event, so we're going to trust him with our virtual event. And
Yeah.
quite honestly, and we'll talk about it more, it's a lot of the same tools in the toolbox, but definitely the way I stepped into this was relationship, relationship, relationship. I took care of my clients. I tried to give them the best product I could. They would come back. I got Chelsea's wedding because it was referred to Chelsea by a client of mine. And I did all of their family's work. And Hillary called this woman and said, hey, Elaine, who should I use for Chelsea's wedding? She was like, Bryan Rafanelli.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine in my fantasy world that same call happened with Michelle Obama and Hillary, but I think it was a little bit of that, that
Yeah.
somebody must have been talking, between the White House and the State Department and said, oh, who should we have help us with our state dinners?
Yeah.
That was
It's
built
a
on
good circle
relationship.
to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I know you always talk about when you're at the galas and when you're at the weddings. I was impressed when I saw you speak about, really understanding who is sitting where and who you're checking in with and building those relationships in a very organic way while you're at one of these incredible events that you're
Right. So
planning.
your best customer is sitting in the room.
Yes,
That's the bottom line. Right now, same thing. The
yes,
best thing is the connectors that are on this call,
yeah,
of really understanding or this platform of how we connect together. That's what you do at PartySlate, right?
absolutely.
You really have to scrub through it. I remember when I was giving that presentation of a really sort of high tech, web person was like, Bryan, what you're doing every day, saying there's 300 people sitting in a room, there's 30 tables, there's X number of people that I want to talk to. That actually happens on social media.
Yeah,
So for those of us that scrub our social media, we can see when our clients are looking at us. We can see when celebrities are looking at us. We can see when potential clients are looking at us. So that's all about trying to make some kind of connection to somebody you don't know. I've
absolutely.
built a company out of people I really do know.
That's amazing. And so, with that, let's talk about. We were all in March, and I was in Las Vegas speaking at the special event with many industry leaders when the pandemic hit. And I saw people looking at their phones saying, I just lost $3 million of business in one day. And we were all, I rode home in a red eye home with, masks. And it was just like it all hit really quickly. How did you react when the pandemic first hit? And then so quickly, again, based on these relationships, move to help your nonprofit clients continue the fundraising, because I know from my nonprofit background, like they can't just skip a year, like, oh, let's just forget to launch. Like it's annual giving, like we call it recurring revenue in my geeky business term. Recurring revenue is what is important to these nonprofits. How did you react? How did you get your team, motivated, inspired to push into the virtual gala, virtual event world?
Look, I think that when you're, I think if you relate it to whatever situation, personal or professional, you're in a crisis. We hit a crisis point, right? And the people that were in front of us, the nonprofits that are in front of us, that were doing their annual galas in March, April, May, June, all of a sudden it was like, oh my God. But the ones that were 30 days out were the first ones we focused on. But we're
Mhm.
like, we have to move you. Right. But then it was a little bit of in real time, which is what we should be doing right now when we talk about the fall or the spring. It's like in real time, things are changing. So how could we change with them? And
Mhm.
then this whole idea of virtual came on really fast, right? So it was all of a sudden everybody was on Zoom. Well, that made sense in the nonprofit world for two reasons. One was, aren't we all producing some kind of show at a nonprofit event? It's this many speakers, a video, animation, photos, a story about the most incredible thing we did with X person or nurse or doctor. So you're doing that. So it was easy for me to just intuitively say, we can do this. We produce shows all the time for our gala clients. Now we have to squish it down into this, literally into this
Yeah.
platform, but into this time frame. And so maybe I was being a little cocky or a little certain, but it did not feel like a pivot to me. It felt like when I talked to clients and they were like, how do you know you can do this? I'm like, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
What's the difference? And I found out my tech people, my stage managers, my production companies, they all, like, we just didn't skip a beat. It was like, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. And did we have to learn quickly about Zoom and Pro Zoom and different platforms? Yes.
Mhm.
However, it was the answer very quickly. I mean, we have done now 36 virtual events since the pandemic happened. The first one, the very first one we ever did for the Boys and Girls Club, it's a little more primitive than the one we just did last week for them for their annual dinner. And the other thing I was going to say to you is, for nonprofits, you can't stop asking for money. If you stop asking for money, you get out of line,
Yeah.
right? So you wanted the Beyonce tickets, you don't get out of line.
Yeah.
So
I like
that's what
that.
was happening with nonprofits. I was like wagging my finger at them and saying, you must do this. It's not that you can think about it.
Yeah.
You need the money by the end of your fiscal year, which is June 30th.
Mhm.
And it's March, and you've already raised half the money. You've got to finish raising the money. How are you going to do it?
Absolutely. And I think what people don't realize is that it's a constant fight. Yes, it's a nonprofit. You love that people just write a check because it's a good cause. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that have a lot of great causes. And so it's the people that connect and create those experiences that are going to get the kind of unfair share of the wallet for these important causes. And that's what I love about these virtual events. From what you've said, is that some of these raise just as much money, if not more, through these virtual experiences. And I know you're a big believer, not getting into kind of the run of show of like before the gala, during the gala, after the gala, of thinking of that whole life cycle of the virtual gala.
Yeah, sure. And look. I think what you have to think about here. And sorry, my dog is actually getting sick. I'm like, can you hear that? Anyway, you do have to really think about it. Pivoting very quickly, though, I think probably what happened to everybody here is you went to people that cared about you. So in the nonprofit world, it was the investors, the board members, the trustees, the gala chairs, the gala committee. They were invested, right? So they wanted this to be successful, whatever this was, virtually or not. And because I definitely have some organizations that said, no, we're
Yeah.
not going virtual. And they pivoted into the fall and they did go virtual. In the spring, others were like, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And they raised more money than they would have raised if they went live.
I love hearing that, because and I think there are differences, but as you said, running a large scale gala, because again, I've been on those committees, it is like running almost a TV show. Yes, it's live, but there's the pre-recorded, there's the stage time, there's the person with the headset. Like, it is very similar. So you guys were well suited to do this. So tell me a little bit about, there's all these virtual events. We also do a lot of digital education. We focus on great content and great speakers, and we've gotten an incredible feedback on the program. But for these galas, how do you maximize the fundraising and the engagement with the gala. And a little bit later, I'm going to show a few pictures and you can kind of walk us through those events. But talk us through, like, how do you maximize the experience and the fundraising?
Well, I think we have to think about it this way, like what comes first, the chicken or the egg,
Yeah.
right? It's like deciding. We know that a person's attention span, and I felt this immediately, was no longer than 30 minutes. Nobody wanted to look at something for more than 30 minutes. So, how many people needed to speak? How many stories did we need to tell? And then, what were the amazing opportunities out there, like the celebrity opportunities? I think we've all seen it, of like celebrities are at home so they can sing in their kitchen for you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But having said that, does a celebrity care about the organization? Does authenticity come through on the screen? Those things all matter on stage at an event, at least in Rafanelli world. I will
Yes.
tell you right now, I do not want some crazy, amazing celebrity that doesn't know the name of the organization to come
Yeah.
up on stage, right? So I don't want that to happen in a virtual experience. I want them to understand. I was a member of the Boys and Girls Club. They helped me. I lived in wherever, and I learned how to cook. I learned how to be a team player, and now I'm a rock star. Okay, great, perfect story. That's the story we want on there. And
Yes.
so that's really what we played out in the virtual world. Like, that was important. And if we couldn't do that, and especially in the beginning, this sort of homegrown thing of like my dog barfing on the bed, that was like gold, right? That was like, it was real.
Yeah.
And that's the balancing act that we're creating right now at Raffinelli, where we're like, we don't want to be too slick, we
Right.
don't want to be too raw, right? So we want to be a little more produced than we were last March, April, and May.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's about like the great production value that, people can't tell. It's very seamless, but those real life moments. And I know many people on this webinar have seen my kids come in like
Sure.
fighting behind and Ace is on many of our webinars, my dog. So I really feel like that's part of the fun. But at the same time, you don't want the Wi-Fi to go down. You don't want the tech not to work. And God forbid, like bidding software or something like that doesn't work. That's when you really have a fail on your hands. So let's talk a little bit
Julie,
about,
can I break in 1 second
Yeah,
and
you
just
have
ask a
questions?
question before we leave this topic?
Yes.
And talking about the production value of it, we do have a question that's asking about your experience with partnering with a production team and what did that look like? Did you do that on the very first one? Building that relationship, if you could just talk about the teamwork with that.
So it's a great question, Pamela, and whomever asked that out there, it is a great question. We always worked with a production company. Now we worked with a few of them. I want to be perfectly honest with you, until we sort of found the right one. And we're working with two right now, so it's not one, but it's this idea that they understood what we were looking for.
Mhm.
So I think that's what my advice about production companies is. If you're a producer right now, you're an event producer, planner, then you need to make sure that your client is being well represented and that you're not getting some sort of cookie cutter experience, right? Because with all due respect, if a production company isn't used to telling stories in the way your client wants to hear them, that's the disconnect.
Mhm.
That's when all you have is like 8 pieces of the puzzle and you throw it together and it's weird, right? And that's like, as an event producer myself in the beginning, I wanted to collaborate with amazingly talented people, but I never let the floral designer or the cake designer or the lighting designer go their own way, right? It all had to funnel this way so that we were all telling the same story. So in using a production company, the benefit to that should be their amazing technical skills,
Yes.
maybe even their amazing skills to produce certain things. Or if you say, Brian, that animation's awesome, it's going to fail on Zoom.
Yeah.
Or, how do I link Zoom or Zoom Pro with Vimeo?
Mhm.
We can talk all day long about that. Or I want to see everybody. How do I do that? And then switch to a film. Like, those are all the things that a production company should be able to, or should be offering you, or you should not be using them. You should
This
be
may be a
going
dumb
your own.
question, but production company is often used to describe many different types of companies. So you have
Okay.
AV companies that have moved into virtual. You have kind of the traditional kind of video companies that also have skill sets. So I always wonder, like, how on PartySlate, what do we call these types of companies and what do they look like? So I know we work with Black Oak Productions a lot in Chicago. That's part of Kehoe Designs. What are those companies called in your world, and what skill sets are in a production company?
So the companies that we work in both New York and Boston, right? They actually were our go-to companies. What you just described of both AV, both the equipment and the ability to produce
Right.
lighting,
Yes.
LED screens, and they could produce a show
Yes.
inside a convention center,
Yes.
right? Like I'm going to that because that's the most complicated show, right?
Right.
So that they understood feeds and clarity and all the
We
pieces
have
of
a
the puzzle.
control panel, right? Like that can,
Right, a
you know
big
what I'm saying?
control
Like there's a big panel in a dark room and that's the production company. Because a lot of people ask me about those companies, what are they? And my best description is the people that produce a large scale gala, the AV lighting companies that also have a tech department that really is good at the video, pre-recorded to live.
Right. And that's really what we sought out. That's what we understood.
Right.
And that's what we went after. And the reason some of them fell off is it has a lot to do with our storytelling and our aesthetic, and not as much of their ability.
Yes.
So that was the difference.
Yeah.
Now, we partnered with WBUR, who actually here in Boston, that has this amazing new live sound studio. And we wanted to go there because we were like, oh, we can produce a show with a beautiful LED screen behind our speakers,
Yes.
and they can push it out because they push it out every single day, right?
Yes.
So that's a good partner in any city that you're in, for sure.
That
The
has a
other
stat
reason we
that you
went
can
to,
use. Yes.
I mean, National Public Radio or somebody, a big radio institution, or WGBH, that's another one here in Boston, but public uh, television station can do it as well. But I was going to go to the other reason we went to our production companies is because they could create a studio for us. Our very first virtual event, I was there live with the CEO of this organization because he wanted to speak live, period, the end. Like he was like, I'm not doing this in my living room.
Yeah.
So he was on a green screen and we did that piece of it. And then we had all the technology of everybody coming on giant screens. We were all in masks. We were in separate spaces, but that was in March. I mean, boom, crazy, right?
Crazy. Yeah.
But that made sense. And then this last one we just did for them, by the way, last week, we did the same thing. So not that much has changed, except for now our production company has a, what's that called? A round screen. So it has sort of that optic visual to it because they're doing so much corporate work.
Yes.
And that's, so for all the gala people out there, nonprofit, to find somebody who's doing lots of corporate virtual is key because you're going to get a better value proposition.
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. And for those of you who are new today, we have a lot of returning guests, but for those of you who are new, just to give you a quick lay of the land on PartySlate, especially if you're doing corporate event or fundraisers, we do have, I'm really proud, a new navigation where you can actually go in, hold on one second, and go right to all fundraiser ideas. And Bryan will post this webinar right here, but you can look at venues, ideas, professionals. Of course, all this is SEO, geeky, optimized. So for people looking for fundraiser ideas, a lot of this comes up. But we're really, if you're looking for a centerpiece, if you're looking for virtual ideas, you can come here and really see incredible, Bryan, your events are in here, curated fundraisers to give you ideas. But I did want to show brag a little bit on Bryan's profile page. You'll see that he's got the 5 rotating cover photos. As you scroll down, your beautiful gala, we have 15 gallery, we have 15 events, but we see you do weddings, rehearsal dinners, corporate events. This is really your portfolio sharing tool. And again, your galas are so incredible. And I always say to people, it takes money to raise money. And I don't know how to say this. Like, if you just have a chicken dinner, you're not going to raise your goals. But these incredible immersive experiences are absolutely stunning. But I did want to show some of these virtual events that we just posted to give you a sense for some of these events that you're talking about. Maybe you could walk us through, Bryan, some of these events here that we have posted. Is this the stage that you were mentioning before?
So you see on the far right, you caught that, Julie. Like, so that's the green screen.
Yeah.
So now, but what those 2 women are standing in front of is an LED screen. So to the right is the green screen that we could project anything on that we wanted in the studio. On the left is actually projection that the chairs of the event are standing in front of. And they pre-recorded their message, but they wanted to be in black tie. This was an event in the fall. So we had lived with virtual events for, at least 6 months, 7 months,
Yeah.
and we were trying to get back on brand to the event itself. So we were really trying to make it feel like
Yeah,
this
elevated.
black tie elevated event.
And when we talked about production company, these are the guys in the production booth.
Well, and that's critical, right? So those plasma screens are teleprompters, right? So that's a whole in studio experience that you would, you'd get at a television studio.
Yeah,
And
and one other thing, Brian, that I'm sure you guys are great at is, because I've done some of these virtual events in studios, it is important to have a director. It doesn't have to be a full-time director. I'm assuming, Brian, you're a big part of that, but you do need a director directing the talent on what's happening and when, and if you redo takes. And again, it's something that came to me when I did this at Black Oak. They had like a stage person that was helping me. It was kind of like the handler. But the people, when you're on stage, even though I'm used to being on stage, you do need direction on how to do these, especially if you haven't done them before.
well, look, we all need direction on, like, sitting here today, right? So
Yeah.
I have my Snapchat filter and my light, and my team is always yelling at me because I use my hands too much. But yeah, so in both cases, you definitely want a
Need it.
director or want a production company that is explaining to you how to read a teleprompter, where to stand,
And
should you memorize, like all of those things
Yeah.
are critical.
so important. And especially if so you have some people that are nervous, that don't, they're not TV actors, that don't do it full time. Tell us a little bit about working with talent and doing performances.
Look, we've had incredible experience because we work with, for instance, this organization that's up on the screen, Celebrity Series. Like, that's what they do. They have this extraordinary talent from all over the world. But if you're looking at the screen right now and you're seeing the little twinkle lights and this amazing performer, and I've forgotten her name, she actually was in her house. She set that up all herself. Like, she knew enough that she wanted to have a little bit more than an empty wall, right? So when this came up, I was like, oh my god, it's perfect, because this amazing person sings like a bird, and that's what everybody was focused on. But it looked interesting enough where it wasn't overproduced, it wasn't overthought, and it fit the organization.
And then you have this text to donate feature as well here. Talk a
Right.
little bit about the real-time fundraising, especially as you get to those emotional moments in the night, the video or whenever it is, the day, the performance, the speaker. How do you tie in the fundraising component?
Well, we have learned that especially in text to pledge, just like where you land it in a live room of after you tell the amazing story, as you mentioned, or the incredible performance, that's when you normally might make a pitch from the stage. Well, now it's there all the time because
Yeah.
you're watching this, and perhaps most of our clients had already donated millions of dollars, right? But they were inspired by this, and they're like, okay, we want to give more. Or they had invited a friend, we want to give more. So over time, we kept on, making the text to pledge number bigger, right?
Yeah.
We were like, oh, we've got to make this bigger. We have to make the whole screen, really simple, so people understood how to do it. And if they clicked on the donate button, they didn't get pulled out of the screen to donate, right? And then had to come back. Like, there was all of these issues we worked out with our providers so that we could say, you know what, if they leave, they're not coming back.
Yeah.
We want to be able to do both. We want people to, just like they would on their smartphone, of like, I want to give $20. Great. And the good news around all of this, both in nonprofit and political fundraising, because I think I do a lot of that, is like there's no entry point anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's like you to get 1,000 or 2,000 gifts is amazing. You wouldn't get that at a black tie. You'd get 500 to 600 gifts.
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit, you told a great story when we were prepping for this about the boxes and the thoughtfulness of sending something ahead, and how you've secured some nice donations through, people are like, oh, are we going to spend the money on the box? Well, the box probably has an ROI, and you've probably calculated that ROI.
Sure. I was very weary in the beginning of sending out a gift box. I thought, was it just going to project this idea that it being too extravagant? But
Yeah.
I have to tell you, we have worked with nonprofits like Breast Cancer Research Foundation. They get, they're partnered with Estee Lauder. They get amazing stuff. What they put in that box is all donated, but it's high quality, versus others of just, we had to curate pieces, really interesting things that people might want to use. Like in the Storybook Ball box, you're staring at cocktail napkins, right? So we wanted to say, okay, you're going to have something that you can always use. It's not going to be, there were bubbles in there because the theme was rainbow fish, but I think if we just gave them bubbles or just gave them candy, it just wouldn't have had the same dimension to it.
Yeah.
I mean, an excitement. But the return on this is that we have found that everyone loves the boxes. Like they just do. And they might say out of the corner of their mouth, oh, I wish they didn't have to spend the money, but are we sending a box? Like it's it's a very, it's like we don't want to send an
but I
invitation,
love it. Yeah.
but we need to send an invitation.
Yeah.
So we have found that it gets people's attention. And the other thing you can do is do that at different levels. For the folks that are giving at 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, they get a different box,
Yes.
right? They just have a different experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, there is a value exchange there, no matter what you say. When you're giving at the higher level, you expect or you appreciate additional access, whether it's to a meet and greet room with a celebrity or it's something, a special gift. I mean,
Sure.
it doesn't work.
The other thing though is stickiness, right? So you want them to stay with you. So and we started both these events are in the fall, so it's starting to get competitive. So we need to stand out. So that receiving the box 3 days before with a bottle of wine and some cheese and a cookie and a program, you're like, oh, Saturday's coming. I have to do this because now I feel bad. They gave me dinner and I have to go.
I'm all for guilt giving for charity.
You really have to be, you have to remember that it's not just for that night. It's something that it's something that people talk about. It makes a connection. It's really the whole conversation we could have about elaborate invitations and why, right? So it's the same thing with the boxes.
And tell us about this protocol session that you had.
So actually, this is a friend of mine. She was the chief of protocol under Barack Obama. And so we did a book event with her. And the reason we show this is a Zoom, by the way, with a screen like that. That's all we've done is create.
I want to know how you do that. So Kylie's listening right now. So for PartySlate, this is called free advice. How do you do so? Is this really easy?
Well, look, is it something that you can do at home on your own Zoom? No. So again, you've got to go through a production company.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that like to do stuff for parties.
Like, I saw some questions in there about money of like something like this is really, really inexpensive to do. So it's like $1,200. Well, in my world, $1,200 is not a lot to create this slide format, right? Yeah. And I wanted to
it elevates it a little bit. It makes it more special. So it's nice.
Vet Capricia. If I had done a book event in New York City, I would have spent $1,200, right? So I was like, oh, okay, let's do it this way.
I've seen her speak, by the way, at an event, and she's incredible. She's amazing. So, and so here's another high-profile fundraiser. Do you want to talk a little bit about this one? It looks like was this a live performance, or was this also pre-recorded?
It was. Well, it was live recorded, which is a conversation we could have. I have a standard now of like this whole nonsense of going live, and I call it nonsense because there's so much risk involved in going live.
Yeah, it makes me nervous with a performance like this. Yeah.
Well, but if Josh Groban performed in studio in LA specifically for this client, all his pitter patter and conversation was about Boston College.
Yeah. Very
personalized, right? But pre-recorded.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty behind this.
And you can make it feel live too.
Yeah. Well, because think about it, I'm trying to think of something that feels live when it's really not live. And I did go back with my clients. I'm like, if we're going to go live, I want it to say live, from PartySlate. Like, I want you to know it's live, right? That's like breaking news on CNN.
Yes.
That's what you want. Because if you don't have that, nobody really knows the difference.
Yes.
So it's all they know is when it goes down because of your connection.
Yes.
Then it's not so good.
Absolutely. And any other, you want to talk a little bit about, you talked about Big Sister.
So this is the, I don't know if everybody's seen this technology, but basically this idea is on the left-hand side, the Big Sister logo, that's what everyone's watching. That's the show. So if we were doing this today, or we're sort of doing it today, right? Look at what's happening. We're like, you see us on the side, and then you're watching the slides. Well, this is a live show that's happening inside of this box. And on the right-hand side is the table of 9 because they sold tables, right? So they wanted to preserve that. So everybody comes into one link, they're all together, they can talk over the program just like you can in the ballroom.
Oh, I like that.
Like, so that's what you can do. We can mute everybody if we want to, and we can open this way and we can close this way. The next generation, by the way, not to confuse you, is everybody comes on live and you can see everybody, because that's what everybody wants. They want to see each other. Then they want to go and see the program, and then they want to go to their table.
Yes.
So we're working
I
on
love
that.
that experience, the going to the table part of it, because a lot of a gala is someone buys a table and you're with friends or family or whatever at that table versus just with 500 people in a room.
Correct. No, just selling the table for $25,000.
So it's not cheap to get the table. No, I'm kidding. But that's part of the fundraiser.
You have to do some, I think you have an obligation to make it feel special. And and this is the answer. It totally is the answer.
And Bryan, this isn't in Zoom, right? I'm just clarifying.
Well, I will tell you this, is that because I went on a webinar last week with Zoom. So Zoom has a new product and that they're launching now. And what they're offering to do is come on live with multiple, everybody comes in, everybody can see each other. Then they transfer into Vimeo or YouTube, right? And so you get the quality that you're looking for, and then you can come back out.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So what I recommend, now again, I'm working with the tech person, but our tech person and my virtual person, who used to be an event manager, by the way, is having those conversations of like, how can we do this? How does it work? And so what's nice about it is that Zoom is offering, I mean, it's an elevated Zoom, but it is a product. They're now, they knew they had to solve this, because what people were doing was having webinars. They weren't using Zoom anymore, right? Because Zoom, it can't do, I think we all know this, but animation, film, like we didn't want to do animation today. We were afraid it was going to get clunky.
Yeah, we don't want the choppy video.
Right. So that's, or you get out of sync, right?
Yes.
So that's what now Zoom is protecting. And if you go onto their website, and I'm totally blanking right now.
We'll actually send with after this webinar, we'll send a recording with links. So any links you have for us, Bryan, we'll include that in our resource document. And then there's a couple more here. This looks like this was the protocol event, and then you have this impact award. Anything else you want to walk through? Because I do know we always get questions on technology. We have about 15 minutes left, and platforms. I always say, coming from a digital consulting background, you always want to first know what your experience is and what you need, what your requirements are, and then you pick the technology. But I'm wondering how you've gone through picking out your production companies, but then also the platforms that you use to bring these experiences to life.
Well, it's basically what you just said. It's like saying, how dynamic do I want this to be? What do I want it to do? If you look at the, it's good. Well, any of these, but if you look at the impact awards, so if you go back to impact awards, you'll see that we wanted functionality to it. We wanted people to be able to give. There was a live auction. Like those are things that they really wanted to preserve. So then we had to go back and say, okay, and we want everyone to be able to go to their own table, and we want everybody to see each other. That's a whole laundry list of things, right? So that's not any different. I'm trying to dumb this down. That's not any different than you producing a gala in a ballroom and saying, we're going to have live speakers. We're going to go live to another remote location. We're going to show a film, and we're going to have spectacular animation. Those are all the things that we did in every Rafanelli gala show. So now we're saying, can we do that? And in the spring, we could not through Zoom, and again, because of the connection. So now the platforms will do that. So Vimeo, YouTube, they will preserve a beautiful beautiful film quality. You won't lose the film quality.
Yes.
Look at these pictures from the Impact Awards. The photography, the film was so critically important, right? So we had to have a platform that could do that. And so, I'm not sure everyone's going to like the answer to this. You can't do this at home, right? You have to go to your production company and have them talk you through the best platform to use. But I'm throwing out this idea that it could be Zoom, it could be Zoom Pro, it could be Vimeo, it could be YouTube, it could be virtual tables, which is another platform. It's really ironing that out. Now it is like a restaurant menu, right? It's as black and white as that. It's how much does it cost? So in virtual tables, which is a product, right? Virtual tables, you pay per table. Now, if you're raising $5 million and you're paying $600 a table, that's not a terrible thing, right? you know, if you add up how much you would normally spend on a gala, and by the way, fun fact, you're going to spend maybe 30% of what you spend on a regular gala.
I think that's something that we have to educate our gala hosts on, because they think, oh, we're going virtual, so it's going to be, a 100th of the cost. And what I explain is like, if you're doing a TV show, this is like you're a producer, a director, a talent, a stage in boxes. It's not like that. So 30%, I hadn't heard anyone give that number, but that sounds right to me. So if you were going to spend $300,000 on a gala, you're going to be spending $100,000 on a really high end.
But you just had, probably for our viewers, right? You're like $100,000, like that. Yeah. That sounds like a lot of money, but not when you're spending $300,000 or $400,000 on a gala.
Yes.
To make the same amount of money. Like our goal with our nonprofit clients is to raise as much money or more, gross as much money or more, which means they're going to net more money.
Yes.
So that's what we're saying to our clients. We're like, look, I know the number may seem kind of crazy because you're like, I'm on Zoom calls all day. Well, it's not exactly a Zoom call.
And again, for the fundraiser people that are doing smaller fundraisers, because I've been involved in those too, like your goal is to raise 100,000 or whatever, you're going to scale up and down your requirements. You can do a really great live engaging Zoom, for your fundraiser.
Yeah. And I don't want to, and I'm not
this type of event, you've got to.
In fact, we use Zoom a lot where if we're going to record something that we're going to put into a show, we'll record off of Zoom. We'll put our speaker on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
And we'll be sitting here and recording that person.
Absolutely.
With their beautiful light and their Snapchat filters and we'll do all of that.
Another topic: how to make yourself look good on Zoom.
Yeah. We need a dedicated.
Everyone wants that secret. Go to Snapchat.
How to?
Can I break in for a second?
Yeah.
Because we're having a lot of questions.
Okay, let's take some questions and then we will wrap up some lessons learned. And I'm going to actually unshare the screen. I will tell you one last thing I want to tell you is we do have virtual events, a new resource page, and Bryan will link up. Of course, I didn't spell it right. So
it's got a dash between virtual and
event. Okay. I don't like when we have dashes. We do have a new resource page on virtual events. And we will send this link out and Bryan will connect this webinar to it. Okay. But we really have been promoting event professionals that have virtual expertise. So now on your profile page, you can click virtual experiences, boxes, whatever your experience is. So you'll show up in this directory. So we'll send the link out to this after.
Okay.
Okay, Pamela, go ahead.
All right. So let's talk about the opportunity to raise money. So we've got questions around, do you partner with a giving platform? Do you get virtual pledges? Do you use QR codes? What about selling tickets to the event? Do you do like a pay what you can? Do you have ticket prices? Like, if you could just holistically kind of talk us through the opportunities to raise money and how you do that.
So we do, so classically for our clients, we have followed the same structure of the event that was live. So if the event was $500 a person, the virtual event is $500 a person. So that does not change, and the sponsorship levels do not change. Having said that, the next question might be, if you donate $10,000 and you get a table of 10, how do you get the table of 10, right? If you're not using virtual tables, which is the platform I mentioned, you don't get that, right? So you're really saying to that client or that donor, we want you to give at the same giving level you gave before. Now, in terms of giving, most of our clients, because they own more mail addresses still than they do snail mail than they do virtual, they do both virtual invitation, printed invitation. Same concept of mailing it back or registering online and making your contribution online. QR codes, yes, we have used QR codes, and I don't have that statistic, but I could probably share it later of how often we started to use them and we started to pull away from them because not everybody understood a QR code, which was fine because we developed the functionality of, yes, there is a giving platform built inside so that you can seamlessly text a pledge and or a live auction. We've only done 2 live auctions out of dozens of virtual events that we've done, but both have been successful. So
I was going to ask about the live auction component. Is there the same excitement like when you're in a room with live auction? It's something special, unique, something you can't buy yourself. How do you recreate that feeling of the live auction?
it's not foolproof because of the time delay.
Yeah.
That is the biggest challenge behind live auctions. But the secret sauce to any live auction, right, is that you have two couples that are in the audience that you know are going to bid on the package. And then surprise, there's like another two and another two, and that's why it starts to get competitive.
Yeah.
So for the most part, in a virtual event, it's you have to build those bidders in and they're bidding in real time, right?
Yeah.
Now, the other piece of the puzzle that we started to do for our fall events that are still going to go virtual, which most of ours are going to go hybrid, but the virtual ones, we are basically saying, let's do basically you can buy the item, right? So for $25,000, you can buy the Birkin bag instead of torturing the whole group on an auction.
Yes.
In virtual galas, I think it's a really good idea. It's a good idea to try to sell the trip because then you're guaranteed the money and you don't have to take the risk.
Yes.
But that's above sponsorship, that's above ticket prices.
Yes.
And I have my development hat on, but you have to be really careful not to double dip.
Absolutely. Pamela, were there other questions from?
Yeah, we have a lot of other questions. So hybrid events. So now as things start to open up, have you had any experience with that yet? What do you think the future is with those kind of experiences?
The future is hybrid events. I think everyone has to understand something. I'm not a scientist, but I'm telling you how this is going to go. We are seeing it with all of our major nonprofits in both New York and in Boston, and especially down south as well, of this idea that yes, we're going to go live. However, there will be a hybrid product, meaning anyone can tap into the virtual event that night and watch the 30-minute show. Now, what we're working on right now is producing a 30-minute show that's both live and virtual. So we don't have to go into the cutting room, right, and edit really quickly a show and shoot it on, because we know that people want to come on live. They want to participate like everybody else. Now, we are not going to show people eating hors d'oeuvres or drinking and cocktails.
No.
We're not going to show dancing if there is dancing. We could have a whole conversation about that, but let's put that on a shelf for now. We are going to produce a 30-minute show that everybody feels like they're in the room. So imagine the screens come up just like the NBA, right? And you can see people at home and the people at home can see you. That we will definitely have that moment and it will be magical. So the future, 22, 23, 24, I believe that this hybrid product is going to keep going, especially in corporate and nonprofit. There's no question in my mind. But even in our weddings, like I started to think of our weddings for the fall, of saying we are definitely going to have to produce this live so people can see it at home because they might not be able to come.
Yeah.
Or they won't want to travel.
It's going to be part of social events forever too. Like grandparents that can't make it, you have family overseas that can be part of it, at least a piece of it. Maybe it's an hour of it. I really think all these skills that we're using are not just because of the pandemic. It's going to be future forward. There's no looking back. There's only looking forward. So I think it's going to open up a whole new world to, of course, corporate and gala for the most, but even social. Not everyone can go to your destination event. Not everyone can go to your wedding or won't be able to. And this is a way to make them feel included. And I'm really excited about this trend.
I am too. And I think from a development point of view, if the donor's like, oh, I can't make it, right? Yeah. You're like, oh, actually you can.
Yes.
We can fix that for you.
It's got to be a great fundraiser, Brian.
You can go to your daughter's wedding and look at our nonprofit event at the same time.
No for an answer, absolutely. And also, you get the special box. There's a value exchange. You can't make it. You can still write your $25,000 check. And again, it all scales down, whether it's $25 or $25,000. It's about feeling included and being part of something bigger than yourself and making an impact.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think I know your answer to this, but when we're talking about hybrid, is it the same pricing structure? If you're attending in person, you're paying the same for your ticket as you are if you're joining from home?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That will not change.
Yeah, and I think I have had questions on other panels about virtual events are, do you have special pricing, whether it's more or less or some other special offering, whether you're there or whether you're virtual. My sense is it sounds like what you're doing is just make it the same. Don't get complicated on package A or package B. It's be part of this and buy it.
Look, I think I think that's an interesting question. I think
Yeah.
it will evolve.
Yes.
I think that will evolve because in the political world, what I think is going to happen is the virtual events thousands of people will come to. The in-person events will get narrowed down. So you'll have like the major donors and
Yes.
super grassroots rallies. And I'm only making that analogy because I think it could happen in nonprofit too.
Yes.
But you have to remember who is your audience, right? So if you're talking to a major donor audience, that's different. Then they're going to appreciate the box and seeing it virtually out of convenience. They're going to love the black tie with the band and the amazing dinner and the powerful speakers. Like they're going to appreciate that. It's
Yeah.
as it pulls down a little of like grassroots versus major donor. That's when I think these conversations are going to happen.
Yeah.
Of like, if you come live, this is what you're going to experience. If you do virtual, this is what you're going to experience. But the whole thing, and I say this with love, keep it simple, stupid. It
Yes.
would begin to become very complicated for a nonprofit volunteer committee to start spinning all these plates of like, if you do
Yeah.
this happens, and you do that. I mean, it's hard enough for event professionals.
Yeah. I think in general, what I've seen with nonprofits, and I'm sure that's also true of corporate events too, the more access, the more value that you get, the more you pay. So there's a value exchange. And I think there's some sense of that already, buying a table, getting a special box. I think it's about that, the value exchange. So, and again, for galas, I sometimes have to explain, because I've been doing them for so long, that people are like, oh, I can't believe how much you spend, on this. And I'm telling you that the investment in the experience, the main thing you want is that connection with the cause. And if you can get that connection with the cause, not only do you get the bigger check that night, but you get them to return the following year. When you have a bad experience, you're not going to get that recurring donation, and they're not going to come back. And so I really do believe these inspired events inspire people. I know I say that all the time, but getting them inspired is what opens the checkbook for these important causes. So I feel that the work you're doing, Bryan, is so important to these causes that could not exist without these big donations.
I completely agree. If we started with relationships, I do think if you build a brand of an event to the organization and you build trust, then when a crisis happens, like has happened, that's when people are opening up their checkbooks, right? So people who are making money out there, and there are a lot of people making money, and I know there are a lot of people suffering financially and with the economy, right? And what's happened in the pandemic. But the people that have the wherewithal to give will give because they trust the organization. They've had great experiences. You made them feel good when it was live and when it was virtual, and you showed need. All of that is going to keep them with you.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of like on nonsense of like, it's too expensive, it's too cheap, like you have to toe the line, right? You have to find the middle,
Yes.
and then you have to build a brand and build trust, and they will come back, rain or shine. They will always be there for you.
I agree. And I think one thing that came to mind when you're talking about the new skill sets. So Kylie, who runs our virtual events, within a matter of weeks, learned how to do digital events. And now we've done, 40 of them and a 2-day conference. And we have our big digital day coming up in April, which I'm very excited about. For many people that are, furloughed still or are out of work, I know I'm biased towards technology, but I believe there is a really good career path in virtual events, hybrid events, and learning that skill sets. And I don't know what your thought is about that, because I feel for the people right now. The industry is going to come back stronger than ever. Trust me, I really, really believe that in the next, 12 to 18 months, it will be like never before. But for the people that are hurting right now or in between jobs, I feel it's such a good opportunity to learn this and to create a career or a skill set around virtual. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess I don't disagree. I mean,
Yeah.
you're challenging me a little of, I often get this question. I have this very robust internship program at Rafanelli, and they're all like, what's your advice? Now, usually it's like, get a business degree, understand how to respect money, take an acting class. And now the idea of understanding, or can you write code? I mean, it's sort of a joke, right? But at the end of the day, I think many of our children and their children are going to be writing code of like understanding how this all works. Sure,
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
And I think you don't necessarily have to code, but even learning how these platforms work and getting an internship or helping someone on a big event like you're doing will expose you to a new world, because I don't think this is going away. I think it's going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to be integrated with our real events. We all know the value of real in-person events, and those are not going away. So we have 5 more minutes. Pamela, do we have any more questions? Otherwise, I'm going to ask Bryan for some kind of closing thoughts on lessons learned. I know we could talk about lessons learned for an hour, but some lessons learned, insights, silver linings of the pandemic.
I think along with that, we do have a question about using the experience that you've gained with these virtual galas to produce like corporate galas, like not nonprofit events. Like, have you started using that yet? So maybe in your lessons learned, you can share a little bit about
Oh,
that.
sure. I think if I understand, so my 3 largest clients are corporations, right? And
Okay.
they pivoted very quickly into the virtual space. And both for some of them, we were doing those book events for that I mentioned, right? It was some all of a sudden they that was part of their program, but suddenly they're like, well, how are we going to do this with our constituency? Some of them are banks where they're like they're whining and dining their clients. How are they going to do it? This is how they're going to do it, right?
Yes.
Another is like, how are we going to throw our holiday party with 500 people? We did it virtually. So this whole, everything that we're talking about, we were able,
Carries over to corporate.
it absolutely carries over to corporate, and it carries over to private too. I mean, we've done plenty of these really sexy, fun private Zooms, Zooms are virtual events. That I did want to bring that up. I wanted to say to you guys, to everybody listening, because I do this every single day in my business of saying you can create the most incredible Zoom experience, right? You don't have to rely on all of these platforms that I'm talking about. They're great assets in the toolbox, and they make, as virtual events become more and more competitive, learn about them, study them, see if you can make the numbers work. But a Zoom, when I did my mother's 85th birthday party last April, right? It was a Zoom call, but we put together all of this interaction and fun, and we moderated the conversation, and we moved it through just like a television show.
Love
And we
it.
had some surprises. We had my mother's friend from Ireland surprise her and come in the middle of the Zoom. Like, this was all the stuff that we are doing. And when I say stuff, I say it respectfully, but that we laid out in a very professional, whiz bang, big budget virtual event. We did it on Zoom, and it was fantastic. If you just analyze John Krasinski's, Some Good News, it's that format, the paper signs and now eventually you got to get a little bit better at that because people have some expectations. But I believe even in the virtual world, there's a high and a low, and not everything should be super slick, because I've done plenty of those shows too that just felt too like We Are the World, and people lost interest.
Not real enough. And I know people have asked about length, and you said half hour to an hour.
Yeah.
Initially, when it came out, like,
35
we had a
minutes.
3-hour gala, we're gonna do a 3-hour virtual event. I'm like, no. What is your sense on like the timing for these virtual galas?
I really believe that they should not be longer than 35 minutes. But if they are longer, the reason that it will carry over, in my opinion, is because the content's so good.
Yeah.
Like, the storytelling is so good. All of a sudden you're like, oh, that was 47 minutes and that was great. But when you start tipping into that an hour, man, it's rough,
It's long.
right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to sit at a dinner and listen to an hour program.
Yeah.
It's painful. They want it to be like this. We're so used to that.
Yeah.
But I always lean back on the content. Like, if the story's really good,
Great
and
content.
don't cut the story, right?
Absolutely.
People will pay attention if it's a brilliant story and well spoken and well delivered. Those are all the tips that work in television. They work in presentation live. They work at live events. So why wouldn't they work on a virtual situation?
Absolutely. And then we have 2 more minutes. So Bryan, you have been so incredible. We've had so many questions we didn't get to, but we will, at our follow-up, send access to Bryan's information, his profile page, and we also have a resource guide on a lot of the things we talked about today. So we will send that to you after this, but share just a couple lessons learned, silver linings of these virtual events in the pandemic.
Well, I guess number one is anything's possible, right? I really do believe that. I think not to get too but it's like, here's, you got to work the problem, right? it's in front of you. You've got to work it. You've got to solve this. And then it's a lot in the sell, right? I get very excited. Like when a client says to me, oh, I can't believe we have to do a virtual event. What should I do? I'm like, well, you need to change your attitude about that.
Yeah.
Right? You have to change the way you think about this, because
Yes.
this is reality. And we need to make it exciting because we have a story to tell. We have money to raise. We need to affect people. And
Yeah.
so we have to bring it
Yeah.
through this screen and make it as exciting as possible. And the other thing I would say to you is throw it all against the wall. Don't get too caught up in the technology. Go
Yeah.
back to what you know for sure
Yes.
is going to be impactful. The assets you have. I mean, I've had more conversations about executive directors or a club member or whatever. They're just terrible. Like they're terrible. So they shouldn't speak, you know, and that this is a television show that you're producing, and,
Yes.
and you need to look at it that way.
Be your biggest evangelists and storytellers, not the person that may give the biggest check or the person that's the chairperson of the board. You need
No, there's
compelling.
always room for the person who's writing the check,
Yeah.
the sponsor.
Sponsor. Right.
However, you know, I always appreciate somebody who's going to lift me up, right, and make me look better. And
Yeah.
they're like, we want to do this for you, but we need you to do this instead,
Yeah.
and it will have better impact. So it's all in the sell. Honestly, it is. And not forget about the technology. We don't get caught up in the technology.
Yeah. Don't let the technology and learning the technology make you scared of telling the right story with the right people. And the technology, even if it's a stripped down Zoom or webinar, will get you there. And so I really appreciate it. And I know, Pamela, we have a couple of upcoming events that we have 30 seconds left. Upcoming events.
I know, upcoming events. We have an upcoming event with LA event planners, well-known Mindy Weiss and Debbie Geller. And so just be on the lookout. We do 2 to 3 events a month. And so, you know, just keep an eye on our social media because we promote it there. And if you want any information, we have a virtual resource guide, virtual event resource guide. You can send an email to digitalevents@partyslate.com.
Perfect. And also we are writing our top venue, top event professional lists again. We went on hold for a little during the pandemic. We are back. So please get your profiles up to date. We're going to go city by city, and we want to put a spotlight on the best talent in the industry, the best creativity, the best spaces. Pamela, thank you for all your hard work on that. Bryan, it is such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your expertise. This chat is on fire, thanking you. And we will stay in touch and send a recording for those who couldn't join. Thank you again, Bryan.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day. Stay warm, everyone. Bye.